It's not. Okay, hopefully we are live for Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshat Chukas. I'm so happy to be here. Happy birthday to Efrat, who's been here for many years, and to Abby's mom. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I want to welcome, we've had lots of new subscribers on our podcast and YouTube channel. And I want to welcome everyone. We're so honored that you're here. And I want to reintroduce myself. I'm Kiki Newman. I'm a Chabad shlucha in Efrat, Israel. Efrat is in Gush Etzion, 20 minutes from Jerusalem. And this class has been going on for 7 or 8 years already.
Wow.
And
what we baby.
Yeah, and it's a weekly class of relevant and very deeply personal messages from the Parsha and the monthly astrology. Thank you for being here and welcome to our space. Okay, so this week's Parsha Chukas, I actually have only taught Chukas once prior in 8 years, because I think I usually teach Tammuz, the energy of the astrology of Tammuz. It always corresponds, and this is the first time I'm teaching Chukas. So I'm really excited. There's a lot of deep messages in Chukas. So Parshat Chukas, the word Chukas means law, but there's different types of law. And this law specifically is talking about totally irrational laws that without Hashem telling us, we would have no clue, like keeping kosher, and specifically in this week's Parsha, the laws of the red cow, of the red heifer. The laws of the red heifer, in very brief, are that the only way for a person to become pure after being in contact with a dead body is to sprinkle them with the ashes of a totally red cow. There's only 10 in the entire history of the Jewish nation from the time of the laws, which were given to them in the first year after they left Egypt. Until Mashiach comes, we'll have the 10th one. So in today's class, we're going to cover an overview of Parshat Chukas. We're going to discuss the time jumps. There's a lot of really cool time jumps in this week's Parsha, and what that teaches us about our own growth cycles and circular growth, and when growth feels like you're not growing at all and you're sliding backwards. And we're also going to talk about the Jewish people's inherent connection to Eretz Yisrael, Moshe hitting the rock and not being able to enter Eretz Yisrael in this week's Parsha, the hitting of the rock, and some other cool stuff about the word Selah. Okay, so a very brief summary. So the Parsha begins with Chukas, the law. This Zos Chukas, this is the super rational law of red heifer, because it's not a logical, rational law we would think of on our own, that we need the ashes of red heifer to atone for spiritual, for the impurity of death. What's interesting about this is that finished the rebellion of Korach. So just a history of where we're holding now. After the rebellion of Korach, the Jewish people stayed in that place of Ritma for 19 years. They didn't travel. And then they wandered in the desert for 19 years. So most of the 42 travelings happened in the second 19 years, making 17 stops over those 19 years. And there were no new laws said during that time. So this law was actually said in the first year, way before the sin of the spies and before the rebellion of Korach and the earth swallowing of Korach in last week's Parsha. So there's no historical events that happen. There's this gap obviously, I'm sure there were events happen, but none recorded in the Torah for 38 years from the rebellion of Korach until now. The next event that happens is right after the Torah recounts, for some reason that we'll explore soon, the laws going backwards to Para Aduma, the red heifer. Suddenly we learn about Miriam's death. We jump right afterwards, 40 years later, or 38 or 40 years later, to the passing of Miriam and the crisis of the water, the Mei Meriva. A lot happens now. So that's the next big historical crisis or event that happens. So Korach, jump 38 years, Miriam, suddenly we have all these travelings, Miriam passes away. When Miriam passes away, right afterwards it says the Jewish people cried out, we're thirsty, we have no water, why did you bring us here to die? There's nowhere to grow anything, it's not good for agriculture. And Moshe and Aaron are like, what do we do now, right? What is the connection between the Be'er and Miriam? When the Be'er, the water that they had in the desert, was in Miriam's merit. And so when Miriam passed away, so did the rock that produced water for them disappeared. This rock was like this reservoir that wherever they went, the rock traveled with them. It was this traveling rock, like straight out of sci-fi books, right? And then whenever they would camp, the rock would produce, I always thought of it as like this place where everyone had to travel. There's millions of people. They're all just waiting by one rock. They would never get water. So what the rock did is that it produced this spring. So it was like springs of water that would travel, and it says it would branch out into many more springs that would go towards their camp. So I imagine them like camping out by their tents, waking up, and all the kids going to play in these like beautiful Mayano everywhere. So the water reached to them, and then when they traveled, it gathered back into the rock, and then when they took it with them, these would have these well springs of water. So they had these oasis that went with them from this magical Well of Miriam. When Miriam passed away, rock disappears, they have no idea where it is, and they're stuck without water, so they're thirsty. So what does Hashem say to Moshe? Famously, Hashem says, Kach es hamata, take your stick, gather the Ada, you and Aaron, and then v'dibartem el hasela, speak to the rock. But take your stick, right? And from here we learn that Moshe had this claim. Anyways, what happens to follow is that you will give them water. So they come and they can't find the rock. And everyone is starting to mock Moshe because Moshe is speaking to the rock, nothing's happening. And Moshe says, Shimuna hamarim, listen, you rebels. Could the wrong rock produce water? We have to find the right rock. He's getting pressured, and he hits the rock gently strikes the rock. Why? Because Moshe had witnessed, Rashi tells us Moshe had witnessed Aaron hitting the rock in another instance, and it worked. Moshe, in that time when Hashem told Aaron to hit the rock, Hashem told him, Aaron has to hit it, not you, because the water saved you when you were an infant, and therefore you can't be the one to be disrespectful and hit the source of water that saved you. So Aaron has to be the one to do it. So Moshe says, okay, Hashem told me to take the stick. Aaron hit the rock. Maybe talking's not working. Hashem wants, and the people are getting really mad. I'm just going to hit it once, and only a little bit of water came out, and that's why the pasuk says that he hit the rock 2 times. So everyone is gathering, yelling at Moshe. The second time, tons of water came out, and tremendous waters came out. There was well springs and oasis, and everyone drank, and their animals drank, and everyone was happy, except Hashem. Hashem says, "What do you mean? I told you because you didn't believe in me to make this Kiddush Hashem, to show that there's so much chassidus in that, to show that you can talk to a rock, and rock will obey Hashem's command, and therefore you will not be the ones to carry this nation into Eretz Yisrael." Now, there is so much chassidut and teachings and commentaries on this. Moshe's big claim was it already said earlier that this whole you won't be the ones to take them into Eretz Yisrael before Moshe did the sin. So it's kind of like Hashem needed a reason, so gave him the stick and then made this happen, led him up to do it, to give him a reason not to go into Eretz Yisrael, but it was already preordained. But on a much deeper level, Hashem, the commentaries, the deepest commentaries, the most prevalent thing is that Moshe was said that you brought this nation out of Mitzrayim and you will go into Eretz Yisrael when they go into Eretz Yisrael. Because this is the new generation. This is 38 years later or 40 years later after the entire nation that left Egypt has already died. Anyone over 20 at the time they left Egypt has died because of the sin of the spies 2 weeks ago, Parsha. And therefore, this is all the next generation. So the generation that you led out of Mitzrayim, they're going to go into Eretz Yisrael in the time coming of Mashiach, and you will stay with them, and you'll be buried with them. And when they go in, you'll go in because you are their leader, and you stay with them until it's time to go in. That is one of the prevalent opinions. There's a lot more to it, but on what was going on here. Okay, what do we want to focus on? So that's the main events of this week's parsha. Then Aaron passes away. So Miriam passed away. Then Aaron passes away, and his son Elazar becomes the next high priest, next Kohen Gadol. Venomous snakes attack the Jewish people after another time that they speak against Hashem and Moshe. And how are they cured from this plague, from this venom? Hashem tells Moshe to put a brass serpent, a copper serpent, which is the sign of the pharmaceutical industry, the serpent on a pole of healing on a high pole. And whoever gazes heavenward, whoever looks at it, because the high serpent will cause them to look up to Hashem, they'll be healed. So looking at the source of their pain, there's so much deep depth there as well, allows them going to the source and to the root of what their snake, And then there is the singing of the rock. Now, I'm going to allude to something that I may or may not have time to talk about today, but there's this really crazy teaching thought that came to me a couple of yeyears ago, where I noticed that there's this theme of talking inanimate objects beginning in last week, or mouth, sorry. First we have the mouth of it, when it speaks about the earth opening up to swallow Korach, it says Pi haaretz, the mouth of the land, the mouth of the earth, not the opening, the mouth, right? Then it swallowed them whole. That was Korach. Now in this week's Parsha Chukas, it says Pi HaBe'er, the mouth. It speaks about the mouth, and I'll tell you when it speaks about the mouth of the rock that opened up, and then the mouth begins to sing Shira. We learned that the rock opened up its mouth and sang Shira, and it says Ali Be'er, the people begin to sing the Shira in this week's Parsha, a song of gratitude to Hashem for the water that the well springs and the water that he gave them. And then in next week's Parsha, do you guys know in Balak, which the donkey, it says, begins to speak as well. Now what's fascinating, what I noticed, what came to me about this was that we have in Mishnah Avos, and Pirkei Avos, Parak, we have the 10 things. It goes through all the 10 Mamarot. One of the things it says there were 10 things that Hashem created Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. There's 10 things Hashem created in the twilight, right before, between like creation and Shabbos. What are those 10 things?
The white ram.
There's the man, the man, the stick, which is in this week's parsha.
The donkey with a bilam.
And three of the things it says. So it says haman, hamata, the written, the writing, the tongs. There are a lot of things. All of them, these like miraculous things that are like creations, but also miraculous. They're created in this like twilight zone. Three of the things it says is in order of this week's parsha. It says pi haaretz, the mouth of the earth that swallowed Korach. Pi habe'er, the mouth of the rock that brought us water. And Pi ha'ason, the mouth of the donkey, in that order. So I thought that was so cool that there was like an allusion to these three parshios in chronological order that were all created in this like twilight zone. So I had a lot of thoughts about this, exploring like what the significance of that is. This sequence of suddenly these three things created in the twilight zone in the beginning of creation, these like supernatural phenomena, but they're all things that don't usually talk or have mouths that are suddenly having mouths. And it could have just said the opening of the rock. But saying the mouth of the rock, to me, is a message, a very, very deep message. Actually didn't plan to teach on this today. Pi haaretz, Korach, the opening of the earth that swallowed Korach. Pi habe'er, the opening of the rock that gave us the well, the opening of the well. Yeah. And Pi ha'atzon, the opening of the mouth of the donkey that suddenly could, this talking donkey, right? It also the week after doesn't say it in the Pirkei Avos, but the week after is Pinchas, and in Pinchas we have the talking lottery. It says Al Pi Hagoral, that we divided the lands of Israel for the mouth of the lottery, and Rashi says that the lottery spoke, right? The first talking sorting hat.
Yeah.
Right? That was the talking hat. So there's talking things. Why give speech or mouths to inanimate objects? What's the deeper teaching of that? So my initial thought was like this. Hashem just finished creating the world through which medium? Through speech.
Right.
And then he's like, of all creations, only the humans, from the four levels of creation of inanimate objects, animals, plant life animals, and humans, only humans have the ability to speak. And Hashem's like, holy cow, like I just created a world through speech, and now I'm giving all humans the ability to have the potential of speech, to speak. And through their speech, they can either create tremendous worlds and create love and connection and change the world and bring light into the world and create beautiful families. And they could also create total chaos and destruction and hatred and wars and violence and destruction and bring the world to total destruction. Our speech is so insanely powerful, and he's like, I need to like hint to them. And so to me, this like is like a layered message, and like Pi haaretz in each week's parsha of these, like, first of all, Korach is the most obvious. Like Korach took his speech and caused so much dissent and destruction. He brought down like an entire nation. He could have caused the like destruction of the whole like unity of this like network of the Jewish people by using just one man, using his mouth to create conflict and attack Moshe Rabbeinu, and then gather, with his words only, gather a few 100,000 people, 250,000 people against Moshe Rabbeinu and cause total chaos. He could have brought the end of the Jewish nation. And so the earth opening its mouth, to me, when it says the word Pi haaretz, it's to say this was the mistake, to point us to say it's because of his mouth. And because you have to recognize the power of your mouth to use your words. In every situation, we can choose to use our words to cause harmony and connection and love, or we could use the same words to like instigate, to like say just the tiniest word or negative thing can be so instigating and so destruction that literally the earth swallowed them up back to like their source. It was like, no, you don't deserve to have speech, right? And so it's not like it's like a foreshadowing or a warning to us about like the power of one person's speech to affect so much multitudes, and the power of the weight we carry with this the being a medaber. In fact, we're actually called, what differentiates humans from animals and other is our speech. Is our power to communicate through speech specifically. And so it was like carry that weight. Okay, the mouth of the rock. That was hard for me to think about, like the depth and to me what the message of saying piha be'er, the mouth of this like flow of water. To me, that's like what I took from that is that we need to learn to balance, like when we use forceful speech to bring out water. Water is like the flow we want to bring out, the effect, what we want, right? The water is the sustenance, what we're trying to get at. Whenever we're using speech, we're usually trying to get something from it. We're trying to like cause an effect, right? Our speech is the cause that brings some sort of effect. And the message of like Moshe hitting the rock and the mouth of the rock was to me like teaching us the balance of when we need to use forceful speech, because sometimes we could have used more persuasive like arguments or lessons or teaching or modeling instead of forceful arguments. The Rebbe always taught that in every situation you could use gvura, which is like, it works. Like if I threaten my kids, it will work. And I use it a lot. And I tend to like just resort straight to like the stick, right? Like hopefully I don't use a stick ever or hit them now, but I will use like more force. Like come here right now, I'm counting, or forceful speech when it gets results. Like hitting the rock got results, but Hashem still said you could have spoken to them and elevated me and shown that even a rock has the will to listen to Hashem. I was going to say, by the way, that the teaching of that was that Moshe didn't want to make the Jews look bad and show, oh look, the rock listened to Hashem just through speech, and you nation and make the Jewish people look bad and say if the rock listens to Hashem and you guys don't. And so some say that Moshe purposely, Chassidut says, hit the rock to not make the Jewish people look bad in a way. In that case. But the message to us, the Rebbe always said that in every situation you never know. How are you meant to know when this child needs boundaries and discipline and force and like a stick, or when this child needs love and extra love and explaining and persuasion? How do you know? And the Rebbe says to always err on the side of chesed. Right? We have this theme constantly that there's chesed or gvura. And he says, when in doubt, sometimes a kid needs boundaries. That doesn't mean always use chesed, because our kids thrive on boundaries as well and having consequences, and they learn from that as well when it's done through love. But if in the moment you don't know which one to use, the Rebbe says, and it's not clear, if force is used in a time when a child needed love, that can have lifelong damage, cause lifelong damage for that child. But if love was used when force was needed, no harm done, right? The worst thing is that the kid, the next time, will be a little bit more loved. So what? And so the Rabbi always said, err on the side of chesed, err on the side of love and gentleness if you don't know when to use chesed and gvura. And so to me, that was like the mouth of the donkey, to like the mouth of the rock and the well and the water and the like influence that we want in our lives when we don't know, to like have this balance of like a stick and the rock. Like take your stick in case, in a way, but like use speech, right? Speak softly, speak gently. Don't use it. You don't use it. You have it there, but you don't necessarily need it. And I thought this was very relevant to me, because how many times do I jump? For me especially, I'm very trigger happy. So like I get very stressed when my kids are not going to school and they're going to miss the bus, and I go straight to like threats. And my husband is like so much more patient than I am, and he'll be like, it's okay, and speak gently and like lovingly, and like, why aren't you going? And I'm like, you go or we're not going on the trip later, right? And so I thought this was such a like powerful reminder to like the importance of like our patience. Yes, it will take longer to get the water out, and it will be really difficult, but that like deep reminder of like our speech and the long-term effects. It can have like this effect of Moshe using the stick instead of the speech, affected his entire life. His entire life's dream was to go to Eretz Yisrael. That's what he lived for. And like, so I think that deeply and soon, like sewn in message of P is like your words and your force and the way you speak to somebody is so life like reverberating. So be so careful how you choose. Pause first and choose if it's the right time to use force or to use persuasion and love and closeness. That.
No.
So my other thought was that that the rock singing Shira later on in the Parsha was the Pi HaBe'er was teaching us also about our power to sing, and how singing elevates us to like a higher consciousness of living on a higher soul consciousness. Like we get so stuck, at least me, in the like stuck thinking and like the rut and the frustrations of life, and suddenly when we sing, we're elevated to a soul consciousness, and we're able to like flow. And like if I turn on music in a time of like deep stress and anxiety and I start to sing or like dance, it elevates me. And so again, Hashem is saying, I gave you speech and I also gave you your mouths to sing. And so like if a rock could sing, you can sing, and tap into this like beauty of your being able to just sing with your children. And so much of Judaism revolves around singing. Like we sing the Moda'ani and we sing Tefillah and we sing Eshes Chayil, and suddenly we're snapped out in that moment of like Shalom Aleichem. We're like stuck in like the stresses of like the mess for me and like the details and everything and the cooking, and then we're like, let me just pause and like sing. So singing can really takes our neshama. There is to like a higher plane of consciousness, a higher plane of functioning. And so don't forget about that, right? Remember that we once took, we had like because of I know not everyone likes the 4-minute warning, but once when we had the 4-minute warning for a bomb shelter, I'm like, let's go get our speaker and we could bring it in, that we could have music and sing in there. And it really took us out of like feeling like despair and terror and like, when is this gonna end? And we were just singing, and then it ended and we're like, we don't wanna leave. And so we didn't always get to that level, but that time we got to like utilize it. We were in a good space and we got to like just sing and dance in the mamad, and it was really joyful. It's not usually like that. The mouth of the donkey. Should I say that for next week? Yes, we'll say that for next week. Okay, so that was just a little bit of a glimpse. We're far in. Okay, going back now. So the end of the Parsha, here's where we get really interesting. So we have Miriam's passing the water crisis, Moshe being punished for hitting the rock, and Aaron passes away, Elazar becomes Amalek, Elazar becomes the high priest, the snakes attack, Amalek attacks, a lot happens. More journeying, a few more journeys. Here's Ali Be'er, I love it. Az Yashir Israel as a Shira Hazot, Ali Be'er Anula. We see arise Be'er, and sing with it. So we see this Be'er singing Shira. There we go. The very end of the Parsha, we have this like echoing of these new spies coming that gets almost overlooked because it is literally like 2 psukim. Fine. So the Jewish people are setting in the land of the Morim, and Moshe sent men, but Yishlach Moshe l'ragel, remember Raglim? Es Yazer, to spy out Yazer, and they went. So Moshe sent spies, but Yilkadu b'noseh, and they captured the villages, but Yoresh as Hamori, and they drove out the Morim that lived there. Okay, so we have this whole, it's summarized to actually, Vayifnu, and then these spies, Vayalo derech Bashan, they went towards Bashan, Og the giant from Bashan, came towards them and had to wage war with them. And Hashem said to Moshe, don't worry, I've given him in your hands, and they struck him down, no survivors remained, and then these spies, the Jewish people, went and camped in the plains of Moab across the Jordan near Yericho. So that's kind of like where we waited to cross into Israel, by like on the other side of the Jordan near Yericho. It's not so far from here, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now this whole thing of the spies is like a really big event that happened that has a lot of expounding, but it was only literally 1.5 psukim here. So now we're going to go into this really deep teaching of the Sicha, a discourse that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in his first year of leadership on Parshat Chukas. And he says this really fascinating question. First of all, we're going to discuss the time jump here. So the whole Parsha of Chukas has like a 40-year span. It spans from the laws of the red heifer that were given right after they left, right after Har Sinai, all the way until right when they're entering Israel, right? When they finish conquering all their wars, it jumps. But it begins with 38. It could have started where Miriam passes away, which is like makes more sense, 17-year jump or 18-year jump after Korah's rebellion. But it takes us back first in this time backwards loop to 40 years earlier, suddenly seemingly out of nowhere, to discuss the laws of red heifer. The commentaries, Rashi brings down the main opinion of this, which is that the same way, what's the juxtaposition of bringing down the laws of the red heifer to Miriam's passing, that just like the red heifer atones for death, also the passing of a tzaddik brings atonement to the whole community, even the greatest of sins. But that's like but he says, what is this time jump going on here? We're going backwards and then forwards. And first he says, let's answer another question. At the end of the Parsha, we have this like almost missable episode of Moshe sending spies to scout out Yazer, which echoes the spies being sent 40 years earlier. Not only that, but they also seem to have not learned from the mistakes of the Meraglim and make the same. You would think that after having to wander in the desert 40 years, the whole generation dies, they would this time be really nervous and say, okay, this time we're going to do exactly what Moshe said. We're not going to deviate because we don't want to be stuck here. We don't know what's going to happen if we deviate. But instead, we see that they deviated from their mission. And the Parsha says, it says Moshe sent them out to spy out Yazer, but instead they deviated from their mission and they captured the villages of Yazer as well, which wasn't what Moshe told them to do. He told them to spy it out, just to check how we could conquer it. And they decided, no, you know what, we're just going to capture it on our own. We're not even going to come back and tell Moshe anything. We're just going to capture it.
How many were there?
They should have been scared. There's got to be more. There's more
We thought it was
after.
just a couple.
No, it could have been a lot because they had to win
had
the
to
war,
be,
right?
yeah.
Now it says also they deviated because after they conquered the land of Sichon, they began to settle the land outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's again like the spy, like they're doing the whole spy's mistake was like, no, we don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael, and now they conquered the land and they fought with the land they needed to pass through to get into Israel, and instead they're settling those lands. And so the Rebbe says something mind-blowing, an answer to all of the above questions. He says the actual opposite was the case, that the Jewish people of the second generation wanted to correct and fix the mistake of the Meraglim by doing the exact opposite. So they said, the Meraglim said, not only did they came back and said, we can't conquer Israel, they said, not only are we going to not do that, we're actually going to conquer it on our own to show how easy it is to conquer. And we're going to do the exact opposite because they were afraid. We're the opposite of afraid. And what was the idea of settling the land outside of Israel? The lands Hashem promised to Avram actually were more than the lands we have now. It includes 3 more lands will be given to us when Mashiach comes. They said, we're going to even settle those lands now and put our presence there and be settlers and have a space there to show how much we love Israel, that we want the entirety of Israel, not just the parts given to us now, but we even want to have a claim on the parts to be when Mashiach comes. And they were saying, we're going to do the exact opposite, to do this like backwards atonement of what they did. And the Rebbe said something fascinating. That's what the time jump in its inner essence is teaching us. Going back in time, the Torah taking us back in time to prior to the sin of Meraglim teaches us that through their teshuvah and the next generation learning from the mistakes of their previous generation, they were able to bring the Jewish nation back to the state they were before the sin of the Meraglim. And the Rebbe teaches us that this is what Shuvah accomplishes. It brings you to Kodem Hachet, to the spiritual state you were. It brings a healing, that the healing or the trauma or the pain or the disconnect that was caused through the mistakes that you've made. When you do Teshuvah, it's like you go back, like you're returning. Your teshuvah doesn't mean you're going back in time, but you're going to a state that you were, this wholeness and this purity and this healing state, as if you were before the sin.
I'm thinking of like it's like almost like the cycle breakers of like generational trauma. Like
Yes.
you're like
Exactly.
you're faced with the same type of scenario.
Yeah.
And your shift might be so subtle, but it's like so much.
Exactly.
So
So that's exactly. So I was really thinking about this. So to summarize, we have in this week's parsha this backwards time jump, and then we have the sin of the spies. And the Rebbe says that through their correction of like being this new generation coming, like the generational fixing of the cycles of the generational trauma, they're saying we want so badly to go into Eretz Yisrael, we're going to conquer it on our own because anyways Hashem is the one giving it to us. Through their teshuvah, they were able to. The Torah takes us back in time to say that they brought the consciousness to the place they were, to their connection to the land that there was before the fracture of the Meraglim. They healed that fissure, and they were able to heal that space so it was like totally healed, as if before the state of the fall, before the sin. And the Rebbe says that this is reflected in the name of the parsha as well, Chukas. Chukas has another meaning. Besides meaning super rational law, it also means engraving, chok, lechkok, like chakuk ala luchos. And so
Engraving or embracing?
Engraving. Engrave. Lichkok, chok.
I'm all about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Chakika means to engrave. If you want to look it up in Hebrew, if you want to engrave something, you do chakika. That's what you write.
It's
Chakika.
legislation, right? It's legislation.
Well, the first term is law, legislation, but the other meaning is that it shares a word with chakika, to engrave. And the Rebbe says that the Jewish people's desire to inherit and inhabit all of Eretz Yisrael permeated. Basically, it came from a space of being totally one. The love for Eretz Yisrael is one with us, engraved inside of our hearts, and not as a separate entity. It totally permeated and was one with our essence and one with our being. And that's where that like deep connection and love for Yisrael that this generation that merited to enter it had, and that continues to every single Jew, whether they've ever even been in Israel or not. And that takes me to, okay, so first, before we can jump to the next thought, I wanted to share my takeaways from this, because I was like, this is a really cool idea, but how does this talk to me and our lives, and how can I make this a little bit more relevant and real? So I had a few thoughts. Number one was that, okay. So my main thought was like this, that I was thinking about the Jewish people like coming back to this like spy. Okay, we're sending out spies again. And again, they're deviating. And that like feeling of like, here we go again. We're back where we started. We're back to sending spies. We're back to the same struggles we had 40 years ago. And to me, that felt like so many times in our lives or in my life when I've struggled, I've worked on something, I've worked, like finally gotten through this like fall or struggle. And then a year later, a week later, here we go again, right? We're back to it. Like I worked with my child, let's say, through like a crisis, and like we finally got through like them sleeping, not sleeping with them, and then we're back to the beginning. Or in my life, like my classic example that I struggle with so much is like I work so hard on my being on time to my own shiurim, to anything I come to, and like I finally make some progress, and then I fall back and I'm back to where I started. And so this like cyclical feeling of like, here we go again. I worked so hard and I'm just right back to the same exact struggle presenting itself again. And just feeling like I'm just falling back. Like there's no growth being made. There's no falling back, or a fight with my spouse, right? And I'm fighting with my spouse. And then we're having the same exact argument, but we already spent like hours working through it. I thought we're done with this. Why are we having the same fight and the same argument again with my kid? And it could just keep coming back in our lives, and it's so dejecting, and we feel so despondent. And that's like in this week's Parsha, like, oh my gosh, spies again, and they're deviating, and like here, and that throughout all of this travels in the desert, they're complaining again. Like we literally complained about water, like this just happened. Like, why are we back to this? Like, why are you not learning from your mistakes? It's so frustrating. Why are we making the same mistakes again? And we have that like self-criticism. I have that like voice that's like so upset at myself. And like, I come to every program, camp, whatever Chabad event I'm running. And I'm like, last year, we were late, and this year I'm gonna do things earlier so I don't get stressed the day before. And then I feel sometimes like I'm exactly in the same place again. And so I was thinking a lot about this, and how truly, if we look at growth as like from a ladder, then it's wrong, because that's not how growth is. Growth is not like what we imagine it to be, that like I'm gonna climb and then I'm just gonna keep going higher. That's not how growth works. Hashem created our cycles of life in a circular way. We're in a circular world. That was also Korach's whole mistake last week. If you listen to the Korach recording of like Korach thinking that like Moshe is closer because he's higher up in the ladder, whereas Hashem is at the core and we're all in this circular space. The cycles of the Jewish holidays and the whole Jewish cycles are so cyclical. And we can even think the same thing about leaving Egypt. Like I finally broke through my Egypt, and then we come again and it's Nisan again, and I'm like, I have to leave Mitzrayim again. We already left Egypt. Why am I back in Egypt and working through this again? Because that's what growth is like. Growth is not linear. Growth is a circular, and I like to say spiral. It's a spiraler growth. So it feels like a circle. It feels like, oh, here I am again, stuck in my own Egypt, stuck in the same argument, the same cycle of self-talk, negative struggles with my children, being late again, doing everything last minute. I'm back to where I started because I think it's supposed to be like, I'm higher up. I'm not going back there. But that's not how life works. We actually are constantly faced in the Parsha, as we see the Jewish people at we're back to Mitzrayim for hunger. We're back to Mitzrayim for hunger again. We're back in Egypt. Why are we going back where we started? You're not going back where you started. You're spiraling again to the same struggles, the same patterns, the same chag, the same thing, but you're coming to it with so much more. You're coming to it with all of the knowledge, hopefully, with all of the growth, and you're coming to it from a totally different place. So externally, yes, you look like you're facing the same exact struggle as you did last time, and you look like you're back where you started. But if you go a little bit deeper, you'll see that the situation is the same, but you are totally not. You have changed so much. And so my husband and I used to feel this way about every program, and like, oh, we're the same mistakes. So we started doing is that after each program we do in Chabad, we write notes, like feedback for next year, which is really good. And we also write our successes, what we did better this time. So we know, because sometimes we forget to look. We say, this time I had that same fight with my husband in the same place. Sometimes I come back to a place and I'm like, we had a really, really bad fight here, like many years ago, or not even so long ago. But look at us now. We might not be perfect now, but we're in the same space in this place and how much we've learned and grown from those struggles since then. Let's try and pause and analyze and reflect on what we've acquired from then and how we might be having the same exact fight. Sometimes like we're having the same fight we had 5 years ago, but we're having it so much differently. We're having it from a place of maybe not feeling like we're, God forbid, like on like separating. We're like from a place of like, no, we're together. We're gonna work through this. We're gonna get through this. It might be hard, but from a place of more trust, more safety, maybe a little bit more respect. Notice the tiny differences. It might on the outside look the same, but if we can take a step back and appreciate how we're coming to it from a much more wholesome place. Like my husband was saying when we discussed this, like a ladder, like two people on a ladder. From the outside, it looks like they're exactly the same exact picture. But if you go a little deeper, one person is going down the ladder and the other person is climbing up the ladder, but you wouldn't know from looking at the picture.
That's deep.
It's really deep. He's so deep. So in a deeper way, you're looking at this fight, you'd be like, wait, are we back to where I started, or am I growing? Am I coming? And so to me, the difference here is where I think the takeaway is, because that's really important to understand the growth. Growth is like jumping. Whenever you jump, you're bending down to jump again. So your backwards growth is the catalyst sometimes, and it's the movement that you need to jump forward. Sometimes you hit rock bottom, we're like, why am I back in this bad cycle? That's part of your growth. And the biggest difference to me is like this week's Parsha, that if you could, in the moment of falling, right? I'm having a bad cycle, a bad fight, I'm feeling late again, I'm struggling, I crashed, I messed up again in this program, whatever it is. In that moment, if we just despair and say, okay, it's happening again, there's no point, what we do instead, what we should be doing instead and need to be doing instead is saying everything prior to now is learning. So now I'm gonna come to this mistake again. I'm gonna come to this struggle again in my life. It's inevitable. We're in a circular, this is gonna happen again. Now that I just fell, this is awesome. Now let me write down all of the takeaways, what I wanna do better next time, what I learned from this time that I fell. Every time you fall, that's learning. And so we messed up, we had this bad fight, let's say. We had this, what can we learn from how we fought? What did I take away from this? So that when this happens again, when we get to the next cycle, I have a higher wisdom. I take all that with me and we're spiraling upwards. I'm back to the spiral, but I'm moving upwards. I'm coming back to it. So much so to that point. And if we truly do that, if I truly can reflect in this moment on what I learned from this falling and getting through this struggle, this crisis, and what I want to improve next time. That's what we do. We write notes every single time. We say, okay, this didn't work. Next time, this is what I want to do differently. And then we schedule it to remind us on our calendars a year from now to read the notes. So like a month before or 2 months before, my calendar will say, read these notes. I'll print them and we'll read them. Sometimes we forget to print them, a lot of times. But when we do, we're like, okay, right, that happened last year. Let's not make that mistake again this year. Let's be readier for this time's crisis, right? We're more ready. We're more armed. We have the wisdom. And so what I'm trying to say is that growth doesn't always look linear. Sometimes it feels like you're falling, but if you can pause and remember that you have all the wisdom from your past mistakes and you have so much more at your disposal and so much more that you've gained and learned from this past times. So now you're coming to it and you can now approach it with hope and be like, this time it's going to be a little bit better. And each time I come to it, I'm going to get to that place until I get to Lifnei, until I have that healing. Like the generational trauma, we are continuing. We have these cycles of trauma of how we react from our ancestors passed down to us, right, in our genetic coding. And when we can like break that cycle for a moment, and to me that's repair. So the other thing I was gonna say is the power of repair. When we mess up, and I mess up and scream at my kids or threaten them or speak unkindly to my husband, I can either despair or I can repair. And repairing is so powerful, and we forget to, and here in the Parsha, it's so great. The Rebbe says that the Torah included an entire like section about something that seems so out of place, just to show you, from 40 years early, to show you that when you repair, you can heal that damage that you caused. So yes, my words are very powerful. I yell at my child instead of the love he needed in that moment. I caused a fracture. But when I can take a moment, which I try so hard to do, which I think is like a gift for our generation to be able to learn how to do that. And I can say, I'm so sorry, X, like my son, Moshe. Right, let's say, and what you did was frustrating, but I shouldn't have screamed at you. You didn't deserve me to scream at you. That was just me having a hard moment. Can we please start again? And then sometimes they'll say no, and if they say yes, I'll be like, let me start again. I love you so much. I'm so stressed out. how can we get out of the house faster? Or are you okay? What's making you, how can I help you? And if I can repair that and look at them in the eye and say, I know that hurt you. How did that feel for you when I screamed at you? And allow them to share how scary it was. And I know that was so scary and I love you so much. And I'm gonna try really hard next time not to scream at you. What should I do next time? I try to say, what should I do next time if I really need to leave the house and you are not listening to me? Instead of screaming, what do you think would be better? What would work for you better and get you to leave? Because I really need to go and I'm missing work, etc. And you're not going. So what would be a better example than screaming? And then we'll come up with ideas. And even that acknowledgement, that moment of like knowing that I heard him and that he was hurt is such a powerful repair moment that the Torah says when you can go back to the same situation and repair it, it takes you back, it heals back that wound, maybe even deeper with like a double knot, right? We say that when there's in Teshuvah, when there's a string that gets cut, by Teshuvah, you would double knot. So that place is actually even stronger than it was before. And so it might hurt. It's still a knot. It doesn't look perfect. Not perfect. But we have this power of repair that's so much more powerful than we know about. And it's hard, but once we exercise that muscle of repairing and apologizing, it's hard. It's harder with my husband, right? But if I can say, I'm so sorry. Can I say that again? Can I try that again? Like if I was frustrated or lashed out about something annoying when he was like trying to help me, I'd be like, let me try that again. Thank you so much for helping me. In the future, would you be able to be like mindful? This is how I like it, whatever, etc. Could you be more careful about that? If I can repair that and start again, it is so healing. It is so much more powerful than we even give it credit to it. Okay, so to summarize, that whole idea was that the Parsha going back, time jumping, is teaching us the power of coming back to our same struggles, which seem like, oh, why again? But when we could come back to the same struggles, imbued with the desire that this time, I'm gonna do a little bit better than last time and learn from what happened last time and come to it, that can bring me to so much healing and depth, to a state of wholeness and healing even prior to the sin, and that comes from Chukas. Now, the word Chukas, saying that the Jewish peoples were one with the land of Israel, and that's what brought about that passion, that commitment to conquer Israel right away and settle all of it. That leads me to my last thought of today, or second last thought of today. Very short. I'll do it in brief. But when Hashem tells Moshe that he's not entering Eretz Yisrael, Moshe is devastated. And one thing that Moshe harps on is that I carried the bones of, he harps on this. Yosef is going to enter Mitzrayim. Yosef. Vayikach Moshe, right? If I show you this in the sources, that's Atzmos. Vayikach Moshe's Asmos Yosef Imo. I took Yosef's bones with me for 40 years because he made us promise that he'll take my bones.
Yeah.
At least Moshe was saying, at least let my bones be buried in Eretz Yisrael, my body. Yosef, who didn't carry the Jewish people like I did, I'm carrying his bones. At least don't I get that honor of my body being buried in Eretz Yisrael. And you see later on in the next pasuk, in the next source in Yehoshua, it says that they did get buried. Where did they bury the bones of Yosef? We know, right? Near Shechem in Israel, right? It says in Shechem. Now, the Medrash there says something fascinating. It says, what's the difference between Moshe and, Rashi says this, brings it down, that, I should have brought the exact Medrash, I forgot to print it.
We don't know where Moshe was buried.
Right.
It says, I need the exact one. Medrash basically says he that was always remembered as a Hebrew, as an Ivri, will be buried in Eretz Yisrael. What does the Medrash teach us? That it says that Yosef was only spent 17 years of his life in Israel, and he spent the most of his life in Egypt. But he was always known as an Ivri, a Hebrew. The word, when we're called the Jews, the Hebrews, Hebrew comes from the word Ivrit, Ivri. What does Ivri even mean? It means Aver Hayarden. It means the other side, La'avor, to cross. It means I come from yonder, Aver Hayarden, from across the Jordan. So it means I don't belong here and I'm implant here. I'm a Hebrew. I'm from the land of the Jewish people. And so we see a couple of sources. The Medrash brings down a couple of sources that I brought for you of when Yosef, even in the depths of Egypt, was referred to always. He made sure it was known to everyone that I am a Hebrew, even though it was considered just horrible to be known as a Jewish person. And even though Egypt was a land of a huge nation and the Jewish people were 70 people, the nation, he was still like, I don't know, I'm part of that nation and not a part of this nation, that I am the vice president of. Could you imagine the vice president of a country still being referred to as an aver, from being another country that only comprises of 70 people in that whole nation. Could you imagine that, like chutzpah, to say no? I might be contributing to your society and helping your economy and I'm a loyal citizen, but this is not the real me. The real me, I am only forced to be here. My real soul, my essence shouldn't be here. And because Yosef's identity was so one with being an Ivri, therefore Hashem said his bones will be buried in Eretz Yisrael.
Yay.
Now, where do we see the difference in Yosef and Moshe? By Yosef it says, but when the wife of Potiphar was angry, wanted to libel him, she said, "Re'u hevi lanu ish ivri letzachek banu." Look, he brought us a Hebrew to dally with us. He came to try and rape me, and I screamed out, etc. Then, when Yosef's in prison, the next source, what does it say? That V'sham itanu, when Yosef told them, the butler and the baker, to remember me, to tell him that I'm here in Egypt, how do they refer to him? He made sure that even in prison, he told everyone, I am an Ivri, not I'm someone from Potiphar's house. Take me out because I'm an important person. V'sham itanu na'ar Ivri, eved l'sar b'tachem. First, he was an Ivri, a Jew. Then he was a servant to Potiphar. Again, it says, okay, and how do we see how abominable it was to be an Ivri even after Yosef, who was the vice minister of second to the king, was known as a Jew? When they served the Yosef and his brothers, they had to eat separately from him. It says the Egyptians who ate with him ate separately. Why? This is in the pasuk in Meresh's Parak Mem Gimel. Ki lo yuchlan hamitzrim lechol es Ivrim lechem ki to'eva hilu Mitzrayim. They weren't allowed to eat bread with them because it was considered abhorrent to even eat in the same room as a Jew. And still, Yosef was unafraid of what they would say about him. Now, obviously, the message for us is so clear for our times. It's like you don't even need to be said, right? But Tomarna ish mitzri atzilenu miyad harom, and then we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, the next source, number 7 in Shemos Parak Beis. Moshe obviously was a proud Jew, but because the Medrash brings down when the daughters of Yisro came and told Yisro, "There's a man." And he saved us from the shepherds. What do they call him? Ish Mitzri. Vayitomar Ish Mitzri, and Mitzri man. Now, it doesn't mean Moshe told him he's a Mitzri. But because even for a moment, he allowed the possibility of someone thinking that he's a Mitzri and not thinking that he's an Ivri, that he belongs in Eretz Yisrael, for that one thing. Obviously, the real reason, the depth of that is beyond the scope of this class. There's a lot more
to Midian, right?
He fled Egypt to Midian.
But then, when he left, he was still like a resident of the palace. Like, he probably looked.
No, it took
like
80
that
years,
before.
actually. He spent 80 years from when he left Egypt. The Medrash tells us till he got to Midian took 80 years. He was the king of.
He left from there, right?
Yeah.
From that event.
He still walked the walk.
He was like probably looking.
No, but I'm saying is that there was an 80-year gap in between when he left and came to Midian.
So he might have changed his clothes.
So how could
But the point, there's a lot to discuss in that. That's a whole
I'm saying he
nother.
never like lived in the house of a Jew. Like
Right.
He came
Oh,
from
you're
that.
saying.
Of course, he knew that.
Yeah.
And that was his identity. But he like
Moshe's not.
he's
Moshe didn't do
saturated
anything.
in Mitzrayim, in
Moshe's
the culture.
yeah. Moshe didn't do anything wrong, but because Yosef went beyond to make sure that everyone knew that he was an Ivri, and so he says, therefore, he will be buried there, and you won't. That's just one teaching. Now, the message, the reason for Moshe's that is beyond the scope of this class. There's so much to explore there. There's a lot more to it. But for today's class, it's the message is so obvious to us, or should be so clear that there's no there's no separation between a Jew and being connected to Eretz Yisrael. It's our DNA. It's a part of us. Hashem. Our source, every neshama passes through Eretz Yisrael. Part of our connection to our soul and to Hashem is through Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is part of our DNA. It's our homeland. For a Jew who never ever stepped foot in Israel, there's a deep part of him that feels connected to this land, whether or not he ever lived here. So much so that thousands of years after not living in this land, where do we daven towards? When we daven, we face Eretz Yisrael. There's like an inherent bodily, physical, soulful connection to this land that is in every Jew. And no matter how much someone might say, I'm not anti-Jews, I'm anti-Israel. That's impossible to say. We try to say it over and over again. There's no difference, right? A Jew is an ivri. Like you could be the prime minister. Why have we been sent? To spread the Kedusha. You may have been sent to different parts of the land, like Yosef was sent to Egypt to spread the holiness to there. Or you might be sent to different parts of the world and through Galus for this deep master plan of Hashem to bring the light of Hashem, the light of Eretz Yisrael, and to spread the Eretz Yisrael to wherever you are in the world, to bring a Shekhinah there. But that doesn't mean this is your land. You can spend your entire life there, but your homeland, the land that Hashem promised you, that said is your land that belongs to you, and your neshama has a portion in that land, divided by God, divinely given by God. It's your land. It's part of your DNA. Part of being a Jew is being connected to Eretz Yisrael and being a part, having this land being given to us by Hashem, not because of the Accords or the Balfour, whatever declaration. There's nothing to do with that. It's part of our inherent soulful, physical DNA. And so it's impossible nowadays to say that I'm anti-Jews, I'm not anti-Jews, I'm just anti-Israel. That doesn't exist. And to empower Jews, all of us, to not be afraid to go into the world when we go in Israel, right? But when we go to America, there's so many Jews that sometimes, Jews from America or Jews from Israel who are afraid, like hide, right? Like I won't go to America. Remember, I lost my other necklace the day before I went to America. I had Karen sell me one of these because I was like, I need to wear this in Israel. Everyone needs to know that I might be visiting here, but I'm Israeli. Even if I don't live in Israel, I need a piece of everyone to know that this is where my neshama belongs. This is where my heart is. This is where my body might be there, but my neshama is there. I'm just an implant here for now, for the mission Hashem wants for me, but this is where my neshama is. This is where I belong. And so to not feel afraid, to like Yosef wasn't afraid to pronounce it, to be proud of it, and also to not be afraid to say I'm a Jew, to be able to proudly be Jewish online. Like Karen's business, I know, I'm sorry, I'm singling you out again, but like Karen could have superficially maybe had more business by not proudly being Israeli, because most of your customers are not Jewish at all.
Really?
Karen sells jewelry to non-Jews around the gorgeous sourced, ethically sourced, beautiful rock cut stones. But Karen made the choice to online. Shouldn't connect to her business, who she is personally, but Karen made the choice to proudly, constantly say, I'm a proud Jewish person living in Israel, I'm Israeli, and to proudly say that. I hope it hasn't affected your business or your followers or anything like that.
For the good, right?
But may we all learn and be have that pillar of strength to not be afraid, to be proud Jews, to be proud Jews of Judea and Samaria, and to carry that belief that this is who we are, and it will never negative. If Yosef could rise to the top, being a Hebrew, right? We don't have to, God forbid, worry about where we're going to affect our business, our parnasa, our relations with other people. We just have to constantly be proud pillars of who we are. And I'll end off with the thought about mine, Sela. Okay, so I love this teaching. So we'll go to the word Sela. There's a crazy teaching. I have to write it down for you. Someone pass me a marker, please. Any color is fine. So maybe a little darker. So if you write down the word Sela, which means the Hebrew word for a rock, you get Samach Lamed Ayin, right? Yeah?
In English,
In Hebrew.
S-E-L-A-H.
It only works in Hebrew. Samach Lamed Ayin. Exactly.
Okay.
There's a crazy thought that if you spell out the word Sela in its full form, which means Samach, if you write out the word Samach, and then you write out the word Lamed, I think I need a better marker. Lamed, actually spelled Samach wrong, it's with a ches.
Okay.
And then Ayin. Then you take the middle letters of all those words. So if you have Sela, I hope this is right.
Okay.
The middle letter of Samach, Lamed, Ayin is Mem, Mem, Yud. So we have that the core of the word Sela itself is Mem, Mem, Yud, which is Mayim.
Oh.
Basically, when you spell out a word in its full form, it means you spell out Sela, which is Samach. The middle letter of Samach is Mem. The middle letter of Lamed is Mem, and the middle letter of Ayin is Yud. And so you end up having Mayim, which teaches us that the inner core of Sela was Mayim the whole time, right? So it teaches us a few things. One, the Hebrew language, the Lashon HaKodesh, is so infinite that even spelled out in its core is that the core of the Sela housed Mayim in it all the time. And it represents that the Sela is only rock on the outside. But the inside, if you probe and the strata and the core of the sela, this rock, you reach and get to the innermost point of the sela, you have mayim there all along. If you just peel back a little layers of the samach and the letters of sela, you have mayim there. And so a few takeaways from that. Mayim is like that flow. It's the source of life. It's the source of all life is water. And this, come on in. And so I had two takeaways from this. Number one is is not to label someone right away as being like one-dimensional. Yeah. We don't need to label someone as, you can wait inside. Come on in, there's AC, you can have some water.
Simcha Moshe.
So number one takeaway from Sela is that we sometimes like rush to label someone as like they're one-dimensional. And I saw this crazy video of the Rebbe this week, I shared it on my stories, that there was a politician who said that he was disappointed that there was a famous Jewish leader who was outwardly anti-Israel. And the Rebbe gave him honor. He was honored to speak at a Chabad function, and the Rebbe met him and gave him honor. And he was like, how could you? This man speaks outwardly against Israel. Why are we even giving him any recognition? So he wrote to the Rebbe about it, how frustrated he was, how bothered he was by this. And the Rebbe said that I wouldn't be so quick to label someone as anti-Israel, especially in politics. He said politics are fluid. They'll go from one opinion to another, and we're not so rigid. In politics, people are very fluid, and so we don't need to label. I'm not quick to label someone as anti-anything. Look at beyond him as a core, and soon after that meeting with the Rebbe, he ended up being appointed to a high position in the community in New York, and he was one of the biggest advocates for Jews and Israel afterwards. And so quick, isn't that crazy? How he moved his opinions. And so, first of all, this is reverberating now because now in New York there's that's happening. But the Rebbe wouldn't label him as anything. The Rebbe would say he's a Jew and his opinions could change, and we could just show him love and treat him with that and show him the beauty. And it doesn't have to be, we don't have to label him so rigid. You're not a Sela. The Sela, even the rock that seems like, no, he's only one way, inside of it is water. So let's give some space, give some love, and let the water come out. It was crazy. He said, I couldn't believe that this person that I was like so upset about ended up being one of the best friends of Jews and Israel. Wow. Isn't that, I was going to look up the name before. My second takeaway is that my husband shared this with me, was that that when we're rigid and unflexible and stubborn, that's not truly our core. That's a very external part of us. When we're acting rigid or we're stubborn or we're frustrated with somebody or how dare you talk to me like that or this is mine, this is yours, that part of us is our Sela, it's the external rock. At our core, the deeper, more real part of us is our mind, our flexibility. At our neshama level, on a deeper level, we have this space. Mayim is strong enough to be able to make space, it accepts whatever molds into it. It's more fluid, it allows itself to change. I can grow, I don't have to be exactly stuck in my ways. I don't have to be I don't have to be only one way. I can mold, I can change, I can move. That's my neshama. My neshama has the ability to adapt and grow and move and be flexible. And even with the space for others, right? When someone tries to make room, a rock won't budge. It's like, no, this is mine. I'm not giving you my spot, right? No room for you, no room for your opinions. It's my way or the highway. But if we go deeper into our neshama, our water, what's beyond that, water, whatever comes at it, the biggest thing come at it, water makes space and surrounds it and encompasses, makes room for everything. It's strong enough to make space, to be flexible, and to have space for others and other opinions, and it's that fluidity.
Also, the Rabbi Akiva, it means what in the rock.
Yeah,
like it actually was
exactly. I was thinking of that as well.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, we began with discussing the power of our speech and the power of song and the potential and this power, how we have to safeguard and use our speech and lean towards chesed over gvura. And we discussed about the healing power of coming back to the same struggles that we faced from a higher perspective with all the teachings we had from the first time, and our chukas, the word chukas, our connection to our land, which I was going to say is chukas, is that it's engraved, it's one with us. Rabbi always said that the luchos are not we're in the parchment of the Torah where there's ink and paper and they could be separated, and that's the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. We're not two separate things that you could say, I'm a Jew, not pro-Israel. It doesn't exist. Even if you think that exists, deep down, you know that it's not true. We're chukos, we're one. And so our connection to our land is that it's a part of us. It's not two separate things. That's lachkok, to engrave. And lastly, our ability to have the core and to find the core of Mayim inside everything, even if it seems so solid and rigid. may we all experience growth and healing in every part of our lives. Thank you so much for joining.
Amen.
I'll see you guys next week.
Right.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.